All right, everyone, I'm going to go ahead and give an introduction. So this is being recorded. My name is Sarah Dixon Morgan, and I'm a Colby Fellow with the Wellness Initiative. Today we have Professor Armstrong, who's going to be giving us some tips and tricks for handling finals with confidence. And then we'll also open the floor up to questions. Abby Donovan is here. She's our student trustee. She's amazing. She's a 3L. And I'll also be able to answer questions. I'm by no means an expert and not as great as Abby, but I'm here. So we'll answer any questions you have. I will go ahead and turn it over to Professor Armstrong.
Hi. I know some of you, I don't know others of you. I teach torts, I teach labor law, employment law, and I also am responsible for some degree of academic support. And so I think I'm helping you or working with you in this context. So I want to spend a couple of minutes just kind of having everyone sort of settle a little bit and then move forward. And before I do that, I just want to ask, what do you guys do to get yourselves in a frame of mind to study? Oh, Abby, I'm going to ask you.
Sure. So that's changed a lot since we moved into whatever circle of hell we're in. Before, I would have a meal so that I'm not distracted by wondering whether I'm hungry or just constantly going to the fridge and hoping something new is in there. So I'd have a meal. I would watch 20 minutes of Shark Tank or whatever television show I felt like, and that would get rid of my need to feel distracted by anything. And then I would dive into studying, and I'd make sure I don't typically do anything for longer than an hour. Maybe other people's attention span is better, but once I start getting to that 60-minute mark, that's when my brain would start wandering. So then I would get up, and typically I'd be doing my work at school. So I would take a lap through the building and then make a plan for how I was going to use my next hour of study time. It's changed now because I pretty much just moved from upstairs in the bedrooms to the couch and back again. So my study sessions are much shorter than an hour now. I cannot make it past 40 to 45 minutes without needing a break from the screen or whatever it is that I'm reading. So I use my dog to break up the sessions now. She is always happy to get some attention. So whenever she'll entertain herself for around that same period of time, and then she'll come and she'll lay her head on my lap or so. And I'm like, okay, great. It's time for me to take a break. But I have to spend much more time planning out what I hope to get out of that, the 40 to 45 minutes that I'm using. So I'll end up spending probably 10 to 15 just figuring out what it is that I'm going to do, and making sure that I have a checklist alongside. So as I am going through, whether I'm reviewing the cases or I'm trying to flesh out my notes, whatever the goal of it is, I have to be checking it off as I go along. Otherwise, I start wandering into the abyss that is the internet, or the 6 different screens that I have going, or just staring out the window and wondering, like, why have I been trapped in my house for the entire year? So it's changed a lot. And I think this is a kind of long-winded response, but the major takeaway should be really planning out what I intend to get out of my study session, keeping it short or to the point where I'm being reasonable in my expectations of my own focus, and keeping it accountable, where after the 45 minutes, I should be able to look on a piece of paper, or if it's a Word document, whatever it is, and see exactly what it is that I accomplished from that session.
Well, that's extremely well organized. Are all of you that well organized? You know, I'm not. So I am in awe of that. I just want you to know. So I'm going to start way further back than that, at a slightly different point. And so if you guys don't mind, I am going to share my screen. Okay. Maybe. Oops, not there. My observation, as having taught a long time and hanging around school, is one of the most important things to do is just to kind of settle yourself and focus. I'm not easily capable of doing that. First of all, I'm screwing around with different things, including but not limited to collapsing my ribbon. I have, like Abby, a number of things that distract me. In fact, most of my life I'm distracted. So I need to settle and focus. And I can think of a number of ways to settle. The quickest way to settle is actually a breathing technique. Don't mock it. It's called 478. You can Google this. So I didn't make this up. You breathe in through your nose to the count of 4. You hold your breath to the count of 7, and then you release it to the count of 8. This is such a well-known breathing technique that there are apps for 478 breathing. So I truly did not make this up. There's something about the sequencing, breathing in through your nose, holding it, and breathing out through your mouth, and the timing that are extremely important. And my observation, having used this technique, is it takes a few days to get used to it. But once you practice that, and don't practice it too many times, because you can actually sort of put yourself to sleep. But after you practice it a couple of times a day, doing it, maybe 4 times each time you practice, days later, if you've still practiced it every day, if you then breathe into the count of 4, your mind will say, oh yeah, I remember this. And your mind will be in the habit of the feeling and then settling. So two things about that technique. First, it's really helpful just in the present. Second, it's a fabulous reminder to your body in an exam when you get anxious. Because if you've settled yourself once and you continue to settle yourself the same way each time, when you need it, you call it up, it'll be there for you. Sorry, I was sort of asked to talk a little bit about stress. And so I'll say it affects people in different ways. It depends on what your stress is. It depends on what your perception of your control is. Some people withdraw, some people get angry. My older son gets really angry. And so having a tool that helps you control your stress is helpful, but honestly, finding a tool that helps you control your environment is really important. And Abby, you're right. We don't have control over a huge chunk of our environment right now, but we can start to control at least the law school exam preparation part of that. I have a link here. There's just a lot about stress that the American Bar Association has put out. And I think Sarah, the wellness page, has got a lot of information on that. As you work your way down to figuring out, clearing things off of your plate, consider what those things are that are in your way. The whole physical aspect of what's happening, that's all something we all have to deal with differently. I don't know what's in, say, Zoe's room or, Abby's room, but we can consider other obstacles, and I can talk with you about those. The idea of having an assessment made or giving grades, the concern about scholarships, keeping them, losing them, this concern about being the best. Those are all obstacles, actually, that get in our way of being the best that we need to be for exams. So with that in mind, I'm going to ask you right here, right now, what concerns along these lines, assessments, grades, scholarships, you have that you think I could answer that might be helpful. I'm going to stop sharing, and if you want to stop recording so people can just raise that without. Wow. So if you don't have those things in your way, then get prepared. Know what you need to know, and it's different for each person. It's also different for each class and for each professor. Master the law, organize yourself, your time, your understanding of the law, how you read and respond, and put yourself in the best place possible. So if you're figuring out how to know what you need to know, think about the purpose and structure of what you're going to be asked, because exam responses, they're all audience-based. Doesn't matter what you want to tell, what you think you want to say. exam responses are audience-based in the same way that a memo is audience-based. It's directed at your senior partner, or a client email is directed to your client, and we use different language, we use different structure. So you really want to think, what is it that a professor wants to know on the exam? So you're going to organize your thinking, hopefully, along the lines of what's going to be most responsive to what the audience is looking for. So think about what the law is, what the principles of law are, what the explanations of those laws are, because that's what we ask you, right, every day in class. Also think about any conditions on the law, any limitations on the law, whether there are alternatives, exceptions, examples, policy considerations. Those are all things that from an academic's perspective, we're asking you to think about. So we're going to want you to put all of those things in your response in a way that's organized. And by organized, again, I mean exam purposed. If an exam question was compare and contrast these two decisions, then having all your material together case by case by case would work great. But we never ask those questions, right? So that organization isn't going to work. You're going to need to think about a different organization. And we always ask you to organize by the rule. And yet people have the hardest time getting to that. But if you have case by case, you can answer, this case is X and we contrast with the other case because. If you're asked, however, I don't know, you're given a fact pattern and you're asked whether the court can assert personal or subject matter jurisdiction, the first thing you're going to do is say the issue, then say the rule, right? And then apply it. So that's what your outline, that's how your organization should be. So you want to get to that position. So if you're thinking, I'm going to organize and rewrite my case briefs, or I'm just going to rewrite my notes, just think again, because that's not time that you have. That isn't the type of organization or structure that's going to be responsive to what your exam reader wants. A thorough, organized, useful presentation of everything the reader wants is more on point. So you think about the law, you think about how the law is structured by rule, by category, by sequence. Contracts is sequence, right? Offer, acceptance, consideration. Tort's not like that. A property law is by category. You got to be specific for each topic. Know what you've covered in class, know the rules and the rule language. And I'll tell you, it doesn't matter if we're going to give you exams that are open book. If you don't know the rules and the rule language, that's what your reader is looking for. If it's not there, it's not going to help you. It's not just enough to conclude either. It's not enough to say that X intended Y, because you can't take a term of art, which for torts is intent, and say and directly conclude about it without going through an explanation of what the law is, because that's what your reader's looking for. Whatever you write, whatever you organize, it doesn't matter how it looks. It doesn't matter, if it's pink or blue or green or colored or handwritten. All your outline, that's for you. What I put in here is going to be pretty tightly organized because I didn't screenshot a lot of the junk that I hand wrote, but you don't feel as though you have to do that. Part of what you're going to put together for yourself so that you are in the best place possible to respond to what the reader is looking for is your mastery of the law. You can take all of your notes and put them together into an outline that is principle by principle or rule by rule. This is right to a jury trial. It doesn't matter. You're going to have to do it for your own topic. Battery, because I teach torts. A battery is, an actor batters another when, and then there's an explanation, right? You can just see this happening. You could have, this is a nice tight outline because it highlights, this is, whoa, not very good. Kobe. That's the topic, that's the issue. And then there are the principles behind that, which are policy considerations, some advantages, some disadvantages, all of which are part of policy considerations, never mind the rule that's there. You can take whatever outline that you have, whatever material that you have scattered around, including Post-it notes that you put in different places so that they're organized the way that you would be asked to present the law, which often reflects how decisions organize the law. And then create what I and other people call an attack outline. And that is, after you have all those things out there, decide on a clue that's going to tell you that you're going to be dealing with a certain issue. So that then your mind says, oh, I have a federal power, I need to address these things. Oh, I have A punched B, I know I have a contact there, I'm gonna have to think about battery. You want to come up with a clue, usually a fact-based clue that tells you that you're going to have to now think about an area of law. I think Professor Rehan calls those context clues. I just call, fact clues, context clues. You want to have that because that speeds up your response time on an exam. It makes you think immediately of the rule of law that you need, and then you think about that rule of law, and then you can go through and read your fact pattern. So you want some kind of a context clue, and then you can start to really condense your outline. In fact, you can eventually condense your outline so far that all you have are single words. But this is not what you're going to write on your exam, right? Remember, you're going to have to write something out that is much more thoroughly explanatory. This, what we're at here, that's the result of your having thought your way through the organization, the rule, the elements or factors, the explanations of those and how they've been applied, exceptions, limitations, and policy considerations. And you can't write all that and memorize it. At least I can't. But you can write it all down and have that become a part of your understanding of the law, to the point where you eventually get something as condensed as that or even this. And that's all you need to memorize. That's all you need to put in front of you if you have an open book exam, because these things will remind you of the work that you went through in order to get to them. They're terms that are kinds of memory triggers. This is a type of a flow chart. There are a couple of them. They're not terribly hard to do. You can do these with, these are done with shapes on Word. You can use smart art graphics on PowerPoint. I think one of my slides, this one has some smart art graphics in them. You can see the arrows that go there. And all I did was click on insert, and that, can you see my whole screen? Yes. And then smart art. And then it gives me an option to pick different organizations, or you can handwrite. A lot of different ways to approach learning the law and thinking about it. You don't have to pick just one. You can try different ones. I would encourage you to try different ones. You don't have to start from any particular point either, but you do want to, in the end, have something that you could put in front of you. Sometimes these kinds of charts start like a spider graph, where you would have one concept that you remember. Did you guys do adverse possession? Yeah. Okay, so the thing I remember most about adverse possession is open and notorious. Is that still what it's called? So I remember open and notorious. So I would have written that down in the middle of my piece of paper, and then I would say, okay, what else do I remember? Statute of limitations, I remember that. Open, notorious, hostile, right? Against the, so if you were working through a problem, you could create a chart, a flow chart just by starting with the concepts that you know, and then you gradually expand those. So here there's some, you can see where there's a concept, and then there's something that's been explained on that concept. Maybe this is like a lot to throw at you, but outlining is just your putting together the law that you've understood, eventually getting it to the point where it's in the order in which it's organized, in the way that you see it in cases, in restatements, or in the rules. And you can get there a number of different ways. The object of going through all the time it takes to get there is, we expect you to be able to not only remember or recall a good deal of the law, because trust me, even if we have open book exams, there's no way you're going to remember every little detail. We want you to be able to understand. And so maybe we will give you terms that say discuss, explain, maybe even summarize, which requires you to do some paraphrasing. We'll need you to be able to apply the law to a given set of facts. So we might use that language. We might ask you to analyze a particular situation, which would require comparing and contrasting. So if there are alternate rules of law, you might wind up using those. And so you could see that kind of language. We might probably not at this point ask you to both evaluate and create. Those are, well, Abby, your last semester, those are like third year kinds of things that you're asked. In seminars, you might be asked to critique a given opinion, and those are some languages. But remembering, understanding, analyzing, and applying, those are all skill sets that first years are expected to start to develop. And what you're asked to use often shows up in the language of the prompt that you're given. But that's in essence what we're looking for there. The more you practice, the more you're going to put what you need to know in working memory. So get your outlines down now, because once you get your outlines down, then you can start to practice. You can start to create sort of a path from a hypothetical fact pattern, a context clue, to your recollection of the law, to your ability to write it out. And whether you learn something visually or you learn something auditorily, whether you learn by talking it out, you want to practice, because the more you rehearse, remembering, seeing a fact pattern, spotting the issue, saying, remembering, writing the law, and then applying it, the quicker this will come for you. And that will be important. And you'll have mastered it in a way. You have to organize your time for this. And time management is really a deliberate choice. You're right, Abby, you just gotta make a list. And it's especially hard now. Screen time is really brutal. I've spent, this is my 4th running hour on screen. I'm done, toast, seriously done. So you guys need to build in for yourselves screen break. And I know that that's an issue with exams, because you're going to be sitting there doing your exams. You need to find a way to build in screen break, whether it is close your eyes or something else. I don't have the answer for that. I'm not in a position where I get to make that break, but you want to start to think about that for yourself. Think about how many days you have in advance of an exam, before the exam, and then allocate your study days to that. I know some people study a little bit of each subject every day. I would kind of discourage you from doing that. You can do what you choose, but I would discourage it, because really mastering something requires a concentrated block of time. If you need to take a nap, that's all good, because actually your brain keeps working while you're sleeping, and it will keep working on the last thing that you were working on before you go to sleep. So if you're trying to get something, take the nap. When you wake up, actually, you'll find that you probably are closer to where you need to be. So a good concentrated period of time. It's better to spend the whole day on a topic before your exam. This will change, when you get to the bar exam, when you have too many topics. But if you can't just spend the whole day, spend half. and make it, make it half. If you're closer to an exam, the half that's the end of the day, and the earlier part of the day is the half that's for a later day in the week, because you're going to have to go back and review anyway. And that creates a degree of continuity. It's all perspective. You'll have the exam is going to ask you maybe for word count. I don't. And it'll feel as though you've gone way over or you're way under. But the reality is eventually you're going to be where you need to be. Don't let yourself get psyched out. You've all had exams now in law school, right? So put yourself in the best place possible. That 478 thing, which reads 479 here for the third time, that's great. You need to try that. And if you try it, send me an email. Tell me how it works. There are other things that you can do. Oh, yay. There are other things that you can do to center yourself. And I'm going to unshare my screen because I kind of need me. Some of the things that you can do to center yourself depend on your having been anxious or wound up or simply needing to focus. What I'm telling you now comes from, a bunch of physical therapists, a couple of occupational therapists, some of my own experience, and some Carner Associates has some great sort of these kinds of activities for people. And what I'm offering you in particular are activities from something called the Brain Gym. You can look it up, but I have it if you'd like. To center ourselves for focus, most people find that a couple of different things helps them. Running, Abby, actually works. It works for a couple of reasons. First, it straightens out your breathing. So you have to breathe. You can't be holding your breath. And second, it gives you something called proprioceptive feedback, which is feedback for your big joints. And when you get that kind of feedback, that's where your nerves are located. So, and your nerves can, if you've got that anxiety can cause tension. So if you're creating feedback there, pressure, your body will recognize that you need, it'll help you focus if you create that pressure yourself and you create it evenly. So a way to do it at your seat would just be to press your hands together, and that creates pressure in your shoulders. Or my favorite is to pull yourself down into your seat, because that creates a lot of big joint pressure in both your hips and your shoulders, and nobody can see that, which is probably my favorite part. That kind of proprioceptive feedback is useful if you're in an exam and you're anxious, because nobody can see it and you can just do it for yourself. That works well. Outside of an exam, people do wall push-ups. They'll push themselves against a wall, lean into it. You can do that obviously in your own house, and it's not the same thing as being in a live exam setting. So that's something that you can do. That kind of settling, it organizes your brain. How about that? That's sort of an easy way. And that's useful because then you can go forward. 4, 7, and 8 helps you settle. Also gives you oxygen, which you guys all know is good for your brain, makes you think better. I'm not going to tell you to hydrate because you all know to do that. If you're in the exam and you can't recall something, and you know it's going to take you too long to go through your textbook, part of recall is the ability of our brain to access information on both sides of the brain. And sometimes when we are tense or anxious, the ability to cross over doesn't happen as easily. Then there's all kinds of reasons for that. But a way to improve that kind of crossover so that you can recall information that your anxieties made it difficult for you to get is to either practice some crossover things. And all I'm doing here is crossing my own personal midline, or that's kind of lame in an exam, especially if they're going to record you. But cross your ankle over one knee And if that doesn't help you recall and settle, cross the other ankle over your knee, the other knee. And I'm not going to do that because that would look goofy on screen. But amazingly enough, just creating that crossover path of your own midline helps recall. It's not like a magic thing. It just helps it because it opens up the path that some of your anxiety is blocking for recall. Those things that I've talked to you about, as I said, they're from a book called The Brain Gym. It's an occupational therapy book. I'm sure if you really wanted it, you could find it online. I have a copy in my office where I'm not anywhere near, but I'd be willing to share that, and I'd certainly, take a look at it. It has some value to it, right? Let's see. Oh, two other things, if I might. They're really quick. Thank you. While you're working, screw it up. Make a lot of mistakes, especially between now and exams. Just make a lot of mistakes because every mistake that you make is a good thing because you learn something from it. If you get it right the first time, you have zero clue what you did. So make a lot of mistakes, try an outline form, test it out on a hypothetical. When it doesn't work, fix it. Keep trying, be flexible in what you're doing. And sort of last, this is kind of a plug, I suppose. We offer a lot of opportunities here for you to be successful at the law school. Mentors, teaching assistants, faculty advisors, academic success, and writing specialists, professors generally. If not now, then later. We offer a spring semester course called Legal Methods that's meant for helping students do even better. What we're talking about in the type of learning that you need to do here is a cognitive shift, which means it happens in its own time. Some examples of cognitive development are walking, some emotional, regulation. This is a cognitive change, so it'll happen when it happens. Some people get it in November, some people get it in March, some people get it in May. It just has to happen. So we have this spring semester course called Legal Methods. If you struggle in the first semester, you'll be invited in. And it's designed to provide tools. It's not terribly substantive. It's really designed to help you figure out how you can learn better. You'll get an invitation from the registrar, or I might reach out to you, or you're welcome to reach out to me because there's a whole lot of people that take that course. But if you are not as successful in the first semester as you want, that course is there for us. All right. You're going to make it and you're going to do well, and I'm going to be proud of you. So, can I answer any questions?
Thank you so much, Professor Armstrong. Continue to think about questions if you have them. If you have a question, you can put it in the chat or you can raise your hand. You can come off mute. We're a small group here, so feel free. You can ask questions of Professor Armstrong or anything you have.
I have to ask, what do you guys do for study groups? I mean, do you use study groups now, or? I know it was easier when you could be there physically.
I think it's a bit more difficult for study groups with COVID and everything. But like I know when I was studying for midterms, I made note cards and we went over them, and think like also like going over the questions that are posted to like Canvas helps too.
Mhm.
So and just getting another input from another individual. It doesn't even have to be like a group of like four, like 2-3 people. it really helps that thought process as well. Like it helps you opens up your mind to different ways to answer a question. So I would say that.
Are there, I don't know this, are there built-in study groups? Do your TAs organize study groups? Sarah, are there study group mechanisms that the school has?
Not as far as I'm aware. I think TAs can do sessions, but I think it's just per class. So
I'm just asking because everyone is so isolated on some level. It seemed like that would be helpful.
I know that for a few classes that I've had, some of the students have just sent out an email like, hey, a couple of us are hopping on Zoom now, so feel free to join. We're reviewing X thing, or bring your questions. So at least in my experience, everything has been very impromptu. There haven't been any set study groups that I've been aware of. But again, my situation is a little different.
Well, yeah, although that's a nice thing to have, the impromptu nature of it, then you feel less obligated, then you're less anxious, then you're less, right, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what.
Philip, do you have a question? Sorry, Professor Armstrong, I saw Philip.
Oh, no, I was just going to add a bit of commentary in that regards. So I'm part of a group where we do things a little bit impromptu as well, where somebody will say, hey, let's go over approximate cost, for example, hypotheticals one night, but also we set greater deadlines. So there will be an agreement among us to say, have this outline done, have this concept prepared by this day, so that everybody can contribute during a Zoom discussion. So it's a combination of both, I'd say.
Philip, does it help to kind of hold each other accountable or yourself accountable to more people?
Yeah, there's certainly that motivation because it's competitive. You want everybody else to do well, but also you want to prove that you've mastered the material or have a substantial command of it. So just pushing one another to be timely with the completion of work is important, and it's doable.
Philip, we're definitely not judging you in our study groups based on how much you know. Just saying.
Happy to hear it.
Judging a little bit. I don't know about that.
And by somebody chooses what to study, Helena chooses what we study. She's the coordinator.
Yeah, I believe that. I know that most TAs are able to help students with outlines. I'm able to help you with any outline. And most of you professors, I think most people will help you and look at your outlines. So I strongly encourage you to make use of those tools. You guys don't have to go it alone. There's no test for who did the best outline, right? So if you want to try out an outlining technique on someone, you should really do it. Abby will volunteer.
Yes, I will. I would just like to add, like, it's Professor Armstrong is sharing all of this, and it might seem less like a, hey, you need to write out this exact thing and repeat it 3 times in order to learn, but everything that she's saying has been incredibly useful to me. I started in the accelerated 2-year program, so I pretty much got thrown in to the second semester of school with everyone else, even though it was my first semester, and Professor Armstrong's help was pretty much the only way that I survived and managed to not just survive, but actually do well. So please listen to what she's saying, and she's available. Reach out, she will help you. And also, yeah, I'm here as well. I'm not anybody's TA this semester. I probably will be a TA for a few of you next semester, but you have my email address, I'm sure. It's adonovan. Feel free to reach out. I don't have that many exams this semester, thankfully, so I am happy to be a resource.
Thank you. And I just put in the chat, there's a wellness post about finals that has some resources that Professor Armstrong mentioned from the ABA's for Law Students website, and then also from Barbary and Quimby, those websites that I'm sure we've all looked at. So it's just little blog posts about how to deal with the stress, and then maybe some tips for outlining.
when you look at commercial tips for outlining, keep in mind that most commercial tips for outlining are designed for the bar exam. And the bar exam is, as my colleagues will say, a mile wide and an inch deep. Your classes are a mile deep and an inch wide. So the surface stuff in the online material, it's not enough. It might help you get an overview organization, but you will need to fill in a whole lot more. So just take care with that. Because they can't tailor their individual outlines to what your professor focuses on, because they just can't. So keep that in mind. Although I admit to, when I was in law school, taking a look at those outlines for structure. So. Right?
Any more questions from anyone? Deep breaths, right? You can do it.
4, 7, 8. Don't just take deep breaths. That's not enough. You know, you have to let them out. Exhale. That's like 90% of it. Oh, don't practice it here. Go practice it at home. Well, Sarah, thank you for inviting me. All right.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
This was great. Thank you.
Thank you all. If you have any more questions, please feel free to email. We're always here.
Definitely.
Thanks for doing this, Sarah.
Bye.
Thank you.